your chair and talk, you're garbled. You're not garbled, but you're not distinct, and we can't hear you.
There's
Can't hear you clearly.
There's an echo quality, isn't there? Tammy?
Yeah, it's unpleasant and hard to understand.
Well, I'll try this and try them, I guess the headphones.
And you have good things to say, so fix it.
I'm trying. I went out and you told
No,
me,
I
Tammy, you bought a brand new
I
microphone.
know. We've been over this, but
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
hello. How are
Good evening,
you?
Alvarez.
Great. How are you guys?
It's good. I'm good.
You know, when somebody says guys, they mean everybody.
We got it.
You're keeping us on our A game, Alvarez.
Yeah. Whatever that is. We're trying valiantly to keep an A game, right? Going, Jose?
I don't know what
Yeah,
it means.
you know.
Tammy, I don't know what it means either.
Well,
I know I don't have one, so.
Hey, you knock that off. If you don't have it, we're all doomed.
It was a beautiful day. I picked up a friend of mine who's a medical school at VMI and took him to breakfast. And he went to schools in Reston, and I was telling him about Bob Simon. And he went to grammar school and everything, and he didn't know anything about Bob.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
And I thought, whoa, what are we teaching in our elementary schools?
Yeah, that's pretty frightening.
Every school should be, I mean, here's 7 principles. And I came up with a slogan. Every kid should be, I want to be like Bob.
Mr. Plattenberg, take notes.
Duly noted.
Wouldn't that be great? Be like Bob. That ought to be a slogan for Reston.
Sure.
Bob. Well, I went to the museum this week for the first time in a long time. And this is my second plug. I bought the supervisor's wife's book. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, that's terrific. Yes.
Yeah.
I can't see it per se, but I'm aware of it, and it's an excellent.
Yeah, in his own words.
Yes.
Yeah, I had a chance to know him a little bit. He's a something.
Yep. John Carter, during the 5-year session that consisted for phase 1 of the former, the plan we're redoing right now, the comp plan, we had a planning principles committee chaired by John Carter, and Mr. Simon came to that, and oh my gosh, it went on for a lot. I don't think it lasted a whole year.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we had the ability to sit, and he would recount stories.
Yeah.
And you really got background of why he thought the way he thought. However, he had some really interesting ideas too that were quite shocking. So I had to learn to sit there with a straight face and not go, "What? Are you serious?"
Tammy, it would be great if you could recall some of them.
Well, I will tell you one is
Okay.
I howled every time Arbor Day came around because he hated tree litter.
Woo.
And he loved the French chateau landscaping with pristine lawns and no litter.
Whoa.
And I was dying because that is the antithesis of what we value in Reston.
Right.
But that was one of them that I had to go, whoa, wait a minute. But he was very interesting.
You're not kidding. If you have another moment, though, I ran a program for kids at 14, my program, but he came to visit once. And one of the things I'll never forget, his take on baseball. I don't know if you've heard it, but
No.
he doesn't consider it a sport. He said people just sit around for 90% of the time doing nothing.
That is him. He was a crazy about tennis.
I'll tell you, because he said if, for instance, if they throw a no-hitter, the only two people that's played the whole game almost is the pitcher and the catcher.
Oh, Lordy.
Oh, yeah. He's something.
Yeah, Alvarez, that's all true, but you know, I actually have a video
Mhm.
of Bob up at a park close to our place pitching a ball to my son when he was about 7 years old, and he did it in such a way, you know, like the 1920s style thing, you know.
Kind of.
Right. Underhand.
It was really funny. So I'll have to dig that video out.
Yeah, that is so cool.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Let's see. How are we doing? Looks like we've got most folks signed in. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I know we're going to try to keep with our tradition and end at 9 o'clock is what we have scheduled tonight. Jose, if you want to go ahead and put the agenda up on the screen.
Yep, just give me 1 second, sorry.
Problem. All right, and while Jose is doing that, I did want to let the group know that I think we're making some progress right now. I think things are coming along on a number of the different topic areas and subgroups, but we do have more work to be done. Jose's working on basically a calendar to go through the summer, at least through July, for the task force, and let's see how we do. Jose, is that agenda ready to go?
Just waiting for presenter privileges. Taking a while, sorry.
No problem. We do have a pretty aggressive agenda tonight, I would say. When it comes up, then here we go. All right. So just very quickly to review what we have updates from the Equity and Public Health subgroup. Also, the Energy and Environment group. Then we're going to hear from the county schools. We've got a presentation and discussion about their presentation and talk about the comprehensive plan. Now, after that, we go right into looking at village centers, convenience centers, non-TSA areas. John Carter is going to be leading that discussion. We're going to be looking for guidance there, verbal guidance on how the comp plan, what the comp plan should say. Then we're going to spend a fair amount of time. John Mooney's going to lead us on transportation. Then we'll go into parks and open space, and that's a pretty full agenda. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Any questions on the agenda before we do that? Okay, then let's get a brief update from the Equity and Public Health subgroup. Alvarez, do you want to give us a quick update on that? And you are muted. Alvarez, you keep unmuting. There we go. There you are.
Okay. I think we're really getting a lot of input, and we're really trying to get down to what the language itself should be. And I think a lot of people are helping us on that. And we're really looking at the one, I think it's called the One Reston Plan. They have a lot of great stuff in there to try and duplicate a lot of that. One of the, I thought, good concepts we came in or talked about was to solve a problem, we need to know what the problem is. So we're really also looking at what equity problems. We know about housing and things like that, but what are really important, and maybe talking to some of the people that deal directly in there, the representatives that deal with the families, looking at how to tackle a problem. One of them that one of our members pointed out was getting food or getting a lot of the people in subsidized housing to the grocery store. They live a long way away, and it doesn't look like we could actually build new paths. But maybe we can come up with a different way rather than getting them to the store necessarily, but getting the food free to them. I also talked to someone recently about the same issue, and they said there's ongoing work to have the bus routes rerouted to help them. I wasn't aware of that, but those are the type of things. How do we encourage people or put language in there that, well, these are our goals, and one of them is to continue to identify issues as they arrive and find solutions for them as an overall writing theme. Does that make sense? So it's a living plan. We don't have all the answers yet. We don't know what all the problems are, but and talk about the 7 principles, what we think it should be, and how we get there is engaging the public sector and the chamber and other people to bring these problems to their attention and work on it together as Restonians. That kind of, and there's a lot of work still to do, but that's kind of the frame of where we're trying to go from my viewpoint. You guys want to add anything to that or anything I might not have covered?
Thank you, Alvarez. Any of the other subgroup members want to chime in on anything with that group? Alvarez, I think you covered some of the high points there. Thank you and the other subgroup members. Really good discussions, very interesting approach and conversations going on. And I think in the pretty near future, there's going to be some draft language coming out of that subgroup. So Alvarez, thank you very much.
Welcome.
I have one
Okay.
suggestion.
Yes.
Walter, John Carter.
Hey, John.
You know, as we move forward, this is breaking new ground, I think, for an area plan. And it should be terrific, I think. But I think the rest of the story is to make sure we can put some of these issues in the other chapters. Transportation, open space, land use, of course, would be just 3. But as we move through, we can't do this all at once, probably. We're not that clever. At least I'm not that clever. But be able to come back and insert the language in appropriate places in the other chapters once this chapter is done to make it real, to make it really work.
John, I'm really
Thank you.
glad you mentioned that, because that is one of the overriding goals to do, and we'll need everybody's help that you know, on those other chapters, how to do it. But that has to be a overall one of the tenets in there. Not only is it a pre-opening preamble, but all the way through ideas on, you know, something.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's, and I'm really glad you brought that out.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, John.
On how to get it done. Everybody's in those particular areas.
Hard work.
Yeah, thank you. And as John mentioned, some of this is cutting edge stuff. I mean, frankly, this is at least in Fairfax County, this is looking to the comprehensive plan, using the comprehensive plan in a slightly new way. So exciting stuff. Thank you very much, Alvarez. Any additional comments or questions on the equity and public health subgroup?
I have a quick question. This is Tammy. I know that we want to integrate subject matter across chapters, but we are also have the goal of keeping our plans very brief enough so that they actually will be read, so that they can be followed. So Walter, do you or John Carter have advice for us? Do we do this integration into other chapters via footnotes, or how do we do that? References? Go to page X in, in transportation, and then transportation, go to page or chapter, equity, and how do we do that?
Yeah, Tammy, thanks for bringing that up. I think the formatting question is one we're gonna have to just feel our way through during the last couple of months of this effort. I think as we go through and get the content right, then the format is going to be right there. It's going to be a question. And what I'm encouraging the different subgroups to do is just do your best to get the content right. Get the paragraphs, get the bullets, and then we'll see how we can bring it all together, and the task force can come up with one coherent document out of that. But Tammy, you're absolutely right. There's another step there.
Yeah, if I can make a comment on that, when I've tried to write things before, I almost never get it done because I keep trying to get each sentence just right. And I read something recently by a great writer, and his advice was at first just to write as much as you can and cut down. Because if you get tied up, and I would get tied up, oh, that paragraph's not right, or that's not right. Just throw everything on there and cut it down. And I think that's where we are. And we are different than all the rest because everybody's working on something, how to make it better and how to include. And we're starting from scratch. But I would encourage everybody in every area, put everything you can think of down, and then start how to say it succinctly and everything else. And I've just started to try that approach because I get locked up. Whoa, that sentence doesn't sound good, or that word even, and it just doesn't get done well, So that's just a thought. Put it as much as you can down, and work it back down. But that's a great how to do it is. But if it's not there, it's not even there to begin with. So just a thought.
Thank you, Albert.
Can I this is Moira. Can I make a quick comment?
Sure, and then Chris Daniel has his hand up, but Moira, go ahead.
Okay, just really quickly, if we're talking about creating walkability in Reston and creating a little bit more urban area in the TSA, one of the things that I think would be we would like to encourage or should encourage is grocery stores or mini markets of some sort. I've lived many places in big cities without a car for years and years. And the most important thing for me was having a store within blocks. I mean, it's very difficult to, if you don't have a lot of money, to get cabs, to do online grocery shopping can be expensive. But if you have the ability to get to a grocery store, within a few minutes, rather than walking miles, it really does make a huge difference. I don't know how you can do that in the comprehensive plan, but I think it should be something to encourage, even if it's little mini markets. I mean, think of New York. You've got mini markets all over the place. They don't have to have big grocery stores, but just to get some food.
Well, Moira, this could be the first place in the Fairfax Comprehensive Plan we say bodega, but I don't know, maybe not.
but yeah, you know what I'm saying? I mean, if you don't have a car, getting groceries can be very challenging. And I cannot tell you how many times I've walked with, 8 bags on the subway. It's very difficult.
Yeah, no, very good point. Thank you, Moira. And Chris has his hand up.
Hi, I just want to say, it was a great meeting, and county staff has really helped us out with providing us with some examples from elsewhere across the country. So while we are building something new here, we're not going it alone without other great tools. We talked about the fact that really the first thing that set this out is some key principles, and I think that was one takeaway from a lot of us, was that talking about equity and community health, we're going to need to have some principles that guide this section. And another tool that we talked about was a lot of these plans seem to have a way to analyze when decisions are made, how are they benefiting or rectifying equity or community health challenges? So that might be really a litmus test that we might see to put the things is when something is proposed, maybe we put some of the question on a developer is how are you helping address these concerns that the county has already prioritized countywide, and highlighting how that is benefiting groups that are not being served well, or how it's benefiting community health. So we got a lot of work to do, but I think Alvarez summarized with the enthusiasm that is appropriate. There's a lot of eager minds to work on it.
Chris, thank you very much. And I see Jan has her hand up as well. Jan?
Okay, I just unmuted, and I just wanted to mention that Southgate Community Center has Capital Food Bank every other Saturday. It's a neighborhood thing that people can walk to that, and they don't have to worry about transportation. It is in the neighborhood. So I just thought if we had more of those, I know there's a Dogwood food bank as well, Dogwood Elementary School. So we could put different ones in different neighborhoods of need, and maybe even a supermarket, small market. Just my thoughts, the information. Thank you.
All right, Jan, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Let's move on. I want to thank the Equity and Public Health Subgroup. Excellent work. Look forward to seeing the report from that group soon. Next, we do have the Energy and Environment Group. I guess either Tammy or Bill, do you have a brief report for us?
Yes, I can say a few words. Bill has been working hard, and I have been pretending to work hard. Bill's been actually redlining. I've been doing research and conferring with various people, coming up with a structure. And for the chapter, we are absolutely adding a new biophilic, by the theory of biophilia, and how that will help our community. And also, we are going to expand on green neighborhoods. Most people don't understand exactly what that is. It dovetails beautifully with equity and public health. So that is one of our crosses with that committee. And Bill has done great work with the red line. We are probably going to use some of the stuff from the existing plan, and we're going to be including water, energy, habitat, and tree cover, noise. Bill Penniman, do you have anything you would like to add? He's muted. So.
Yeah, no, I think that sums it up. I think we're getting fairly close to get something that can be circulated, but we've gotten input from folks who've been working on the biophilia issues and other issues identified in the Razor reports and the like. And so I think we're getting there.
Yes, and we're not rushing it because we want to do it right. But as soon as we have some draft material, we will contact Jose to share it. So thank you.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you, Tammy. And thank you, Bill. And Tammy, it's always good to be the idea person in a duo like that.
Yeah. Oh, as well, you know. Thanks.
I know. I love it. No, thank you very much, Tammy and Bill. Okay, then let's move on. We do have on the agenda, we have a guest or two tonight from Fairfax County Public Schools. And Jose, actually, if you want to go ahead and if there's content to share, and if you want to make the introduction. I'm not sure who we have with us tonight.
Sorry, struggling to find that unmute button. I believe we have Jeff Plattenberg from schools and also Pranita.
Oh, great. Jeff and Pranita. Fantastic.
I'm here too.
Okay.
Melanie
The
Marin of
floor
the school
is
board.
yours.
Melanie Marin's also here too.
Oh, yes. Fantastic. Great. Melanie's here. Thank you. So let's go ahead and I guess, Jeff, are you kicking it off? And then you have a presentation, and then afterwards, as task force members have questions or comments, let's go ahead and dive right in.
That'd be great. Ms. Marin, was there anything you wanted to add first before I get started?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would just like to say thank you, Supervisor Alcorn, for inviting us to this discussion on the comprehensive plan study from the school's perspective. And I really just want to say it does feel like a very collaborative process. in working with you, Mr. Alcorn, because you know so much about planning and development, and you're very interested in planning related to schools and can really follow the needs. I just can't express enough how these two bodies, the county with the Board of Supervisors and county executive, and the school division with the school board and the superintendent, you know, if we want to keep and further Fairfax as a place where residents can thrive, this kind of collaboration is a must. So I'll just say, you know, I'll tell you, when I'm driving around and I see new development happening, my stomach does a flip-flop if I don't know off the top of my head whether the needs for schools have been considered. So thankfully, you know, staff from each of our offices has been building up a real process in communication so that people know, you know, our agencies know, and schools aren't an afterthought when development is happening. So I'll hand it over to our Assistant Superintendent for Facilities and Transportation Services at FCPS, Mr. Jeff Plattenberg, who will speak much detail about the school and county connection in this planning work.
Thank you so much, Ms. Marin, and also thank you again, Supervisor Alcorn, for having us here this evening. I am joined with Pranita Ranvize. She's a member of our staff that's just done amazing work working with the county, and I can't thank Commissioner Carter for the work that he's done, and with the schools committee and the work we've done in that area to make sure that we're all communicating and collaborating together. I mean, it's just been phenomenal work. So it's really quite a good time. I have a number of slides that I'm just going to go through fairly quickly. And Jose, if you wouldn't mind advancing them, I'd appreciate that if you help me out. The first slide really talks about, you know, a little bit of background as part of the development review process with the Fairfax County government to determine any impacts that proposed residential developments may have on schools or school facilities. The Fairfax County Public Schools identifies the current and projected student membership and the school capacity for the schools that serve the study area. We also estimate the potential student yield from the proposed development, and Fairfax County Public Schools countywide student yield ratios are used to calculate any potential student yield or impact from the proposed residential developments by individual housing type and the school level. We also provide recommendations to offset the potential impacts. That's an area where we may have some opportunities for improvement. And I know Supervisor Alcorn's been doing an outstanding job of, and also Planning Commissioner Carter, to just identify what that may be and how we can begin to address that. And it's important to note, as I mentioned about the collaborative work with the Planning Commission, the school subcommittee, and the recommendations that came out of that our student yield ratios and our profit formula are currently being updated. We're trying to look at regionalizing them instead of using a countywide average that was agreed upon and what I term as one of those legacy systems. The Fairfax County Public Schools Capital Improvement Program, or what we call the CIP, is an annual review where we take a look at the current student membership and facilities data, and then we project outward. And we take a look at that annually so that we can keep current as different areas, TSAs and so forth, are fleshed out, and different plans, much like this one, are fleshed out. The 5-year projection set had not been produced as the possible future impact of the unique decline of the membership in school year 2020 and 2021, because it depends on many factors, including the future course of the pandemic and economic conditions. So we took a look around the nation to see who was doing what with that. We talked to our local neighbors, and it was really mixed. People were really throwing a curveball with that. And the predominant factor was folks saying, we're going to have to take a pause to see exactly what the long-term impact is. Because the short-term impact for us, as we've presented to our school board, has been mixed, really. At the kindergarten level, we had many students that weren't registered for obvious reasons. And at some of the elementary and then the secondary, some students were not enrolled at the beginning of the school year. We had up to 8,000 students that weren't accounted for, that we did an outstanding job of reaching out to families, trying to engage them, and really kind of wiped out that deficit at the beginning of the school year. But it's been challenging, to say the least, to kind of work through that. So as I said, an assessment of the facility capacity was also not completed, and program capacity utilization was not calculated due to our virtual start and ongoing planning for a return to school with social distancing requiring all of our rooms for instruction. So what does that mean? What that means is Each year, we have each school identify, it's a self-reporting system based upon charts that we ask them to fill out, how they're programming, how they're using their spaces. And then we go ahead and work with the individual principals to see exactly what we can do to improve that, and also what we need to do to offset any impacts that they may see. And we didn't do that intentionally because we felt that that would really be an aberration. It would be just not accurate data. As we think, as we look forward to returning in the fall, we're seeing things in the intent of parents. There's a lot more positivity based upon the vaccination. This county's done an absolutely incredible job. Really, the folks at the general county level have been really doing an amazing job of getting people vaccinated, getting information out there. And it's, for those of us who've been through the process, it's an amazingly efficient process to try and make sure that we take care of our communities. The adopted CIP, the FY 2022-2026, assumes the same membership projections, the capacity utilization, and the potential solutions that we had in the prior year for those reasons that I mentioned. Now, the next slide really just talks a little bit about this map really just displays what you all know and have been talking about, and the Reston study area, but it also includes the high school locations and the boundaries. And the study area is identified there in pink on your screen. The high school locations are the red points, and the school boundaries are identified as red lines. For school year 2020 and 2021, the area that we're talking about is served by Herndon, Langley, South Lakes, and Westfield high schools. The next slide really talks about the middle school locations and boundaries. Again, it's displayed in pink, with the middle school locations as blue points and the school boundaries as blue lines. The school year 2020-2021 area is served by Carson, Cooper, Herndon, and Hughes middle schools. When we go to the next slide, we talk about the elementary schools, the school locations and their boundaries. The study area is displayed in pink, and the elementary school locations as green points, and school boundaries as the green lines. The school year 2020-2021, the area is served by Aldrin, Armstrong, Coates, Dogwood, Forest Edge, Forestville, Fox Mill, Hunters Woods, Lake Ann, McNair, McNair Upper, Sunrise Valley, and Terracet Elementary Schools. McNair Upper was recently completed construction to address the overcrowding in the northwest area of the county, and it's a new facility to accommodate the increased enrollment in Region 5, and it accommodates grades 3 through 6, with McNair Elementary School accommodating K through 2. The information that we have on our student membership and capacity utilizations for these schools can also be found in the FCPS CIP, which can be searched on our website, or in our facilities and membership dashboards, which also can be searched on our website. The next slide talks about based on the planned residential development considered in the adopted Reston Comprehensive Plan over the next 20 to 30 years. So FCPS estimated a potential student yield of 1,600 elementary students, 425 middle, and 880 high school students. To accommodate for the growth envisioned in the plan, Fairfax County Public Schools recommends mitigation strategies to offset potential impacts on schools. Depending on the potential impact, contributions may include dedicated land or buildings, traditional monetary contributions, or innovative solutions such as repurposing buildings, and locating school facilities with parks, co-locating, or co-locating with commercial or residential developments and residential buildings. We've had to really be creative in this arena, and we've been looking at a number of different options, and we do have some previous proof of concepts. So to accommodate for the growth envisioned in the plan, FCPS identified the need for, and again, Planning Commissioner Carter was really forward thinking and pressing for the impacts on what we think we're going to need. The need for one new elementary school in the Town Center North District, one new elementary school in the Central Sunrise Valley District, one new middle school to the west of Reston, potentially in the Innovation Center area, one new high school to the west of Reston, potentially in the Innovation Center area, and capacity enhancements at our existing facilities. The next slide really talks about our process, really. School Board Policy 8120.2 states that preferred capacity for schools, absent any extraordinary circumstances, are 950 for elementary, 1350 for middle, and 2,500 for high schools. The table that's here shows the thresholds on when there would be potentially be a need for a new school based on the school year 2015-16 countywide student yield ratios and the IPLS forecasted housing from the Fairfax County government in the Reston area. By 2025, there's anticipated 3,552 new housing units in Reston since 2020, which would potentially yield 975 new students and generate the need for an elementary school, which has been identified in the adopted comprehensive plan. By 2035, there'll be 9,586 new housing units in Reston since 2020, which would potentially yield 2,536 new students and generate need for a second elementary school, which has been identified in the adopted comprehensive plan. The next slide, really it says by 2045, there'll be 15,682 new housing units in Reston since 2020, which would potentially yield 4,083 new students and generate the need for an additional third elementary school that has not, I repeat, not been identified in the adopted comprehensive plan. By 2050, there will be 18,716 new housing units in Reston since 2020, which would potentially yield 4,852 new students and generate a need for a middle school and a high school, which has been identified in the adopted comprehensive plan. The need for capacity enhancement at existing facilities, as identified in the adopted comprehensive plan, remains the same. The next slide, really, staff recommends periodic capacity assessments of schools that serve the Reston area to evaluate the effectiveness and the sufficiency of school mitigation measures. The need for additional school sites or capacity enhancements should begin planning prior to when they're needed due to the time for construction. It's kind of a lengthy process, but it's one that really, taking into account the comprehensive plan, all of the developments, looking at it, we update, as I said, annually in our CIP to keep folks abreast of when our timing is and when our needs are. Site identification and planning for the new schools in accordance with Fairfax County School Board Policy 8310, Policy and Regulation 8320, which establish policy and procedures in site planning and development, school and building site acquisition, and the policy plan of the Fairfax County Comprehensive Plan, which outlines objectives and goals for the county and public schools. And it's important to note that the Public Facilities Policy Plan is under review through an authorization of a plan amendment, including reviewing the alignment of those updates within our CIP. Recommended site requirements also include considering placing sites, as I mentioned, meeting the optimum number of location criteria. And some were talked about prior to this meeting: the safe and convenient accessibility to pedestrian and road networks and transit where available. Considering proximity to residential or mixed use areas, the existing and or planned road network, traffic patterns and transit conditions, and considering a location in or in the periphery of residential or mixed use areas. And our last slide, before we'll continue on a little bit, really just gives the resources and references for folks to go ahead and take a look a little bit more about what I'm talking about. All in all, we've been doing a really good job of working together, but you can see it's a really healthy problem to have. It's one where when you have this much activity going on in a planned area and you have this much collaboration and cooperation, it allows for us to go ahead and plan out what we think may be needed. Now, some of the conversation at the beginning of this meeting was really about what can we do, what is the problem to identify? And for schools, we do a really good job of working with the county staff to identify what the impact area may be, what our yields may be, and the timing based on economic conditions and so forth, developers, when they get their approval, when they actually pull their permits, when they start construction, when that starts to occur, and when we need our facilities. Historically, funding for our schools has come from bond referenda. And generally, that has really started to lag on when the need has been, as I mentioned at the beginning of my little slide presentation. Some of the things that we've been working with Supervisor Alcorn and also the staff is really trying to identify how some of that impact on development can be offset and being creative about how to not only identify where we may need a site, because as everybody knows, the cost for sites can be really extremely cost prohibitive. And when we look at only having $180 million a year to spend on our capital program, which includes renovations and new construction, it doesn't really allow for addressing a lot of fast growth needs. And when you look at the cost of proposed high school or the site for a high school, that's why I mentioned the co-location. And the co-location and the repurposing really are effective tools that we have to be able to work together, whether it's through parks, the park authority, and looking at land they have, co-locating next to rec centers or potential builds that they may have, and the like, so that we can go ahead and try and stay ahead of the demand. So with that, we currently are one elementary school that is not identified and not funded, and looking at how we can go ahead and address that through the developer contributions, through, there are many different resources that Supervisor Alcorn and his team and also other supervisors have been looking at to help offset that capital expense. And then that doesn't even get into the operational, the staffing of the teachers, the administrators, the transportation if we have to provide busing and so forth. So it really is something where it's a healthy problem to have. It's one that really makes Fairfax County truly unique in the revisioning and exactly what we're talking about in the Reston Comprehensive Plan study. So with that, Supervisor Alcorn, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you all.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That was a very, very information-packed presentation. Thank you for getting through all that so quickly. Before I open it up for any questions from task force members, Jeff, I do want to encourage you during the next month or so, where you have updates or suggestions for how the Reston Comprehensive Plan might be improved. Love to see that language, and I know the task force members would as well. Just checking to see if anyone has their hand up. I don't see any hands, but any questions from task force members? And if so, go ahead and just unmute yourself. Oh, I do see Gary Maupin has his hand up. Go ahead, Gary, and then Jennifer Jumpchuck after Gary.
I just thought that was a great presentation that, as you said, went so fast. It was just wonderful. I guess I was a little concerned about the multi-purposing in terms of, you know, the impact on students and so forth, and maybe talking about that, having gone here from, you know, 1 through 12 through Fairfax County, a couple of kids from K through 12, and 2 grandkids through K through 12, and now one's about to go to 9th. I guess I had a concern about the, you know, putting those schools in residential buildings, that kind of thing. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I, as well, I've done pretty much the same, you know, having grown up here and from the really 1969 on, and seeing the change that's happened. You know, when Fairfax County was first going through its major growth and the significant growth in the 70s and 80s, a lot of times we, as a part of the development, would get a proffered land site. And that feature shown or land site that was identified was in residential areas. And they were kept small intentionally. And what happened with that is that as growth came and as neighborhoods turned over and as enrollment grew, they really just were pretty much overwhelmed. And it became something where we couldn't find enough space for individual schools. The conversation isn't about, and I want to seek clarification on this, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Marvin, because the fact of the matter is when we talk about residential, we're not talking about putting schools in the residential, actually homes, if that's what, I don't know if that's what.
No, I just meant putting in I guess a high rise or multifamily building.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's what I heard. Maybe I heard.
Absolutely. And the work that I've done, and I've done international work in facilities and so forth. And what we did with the Bailey's Upper, we had a mid-rise or low to mid-rise building that we converted. That turned out really successful. And we have looked at models for high schools and so forth. In fact, I've even looked at some abandoned properties in the impact area when we were initially talking about some of the other schools to see if we could convert some of the old distribution facilities that were there. One had a shipping area that was a large bay warehouse that actually fit pretty well within our specifications to be converted into a gymnasium. And then the office areas were spaced out enough that we could have converted that for elementary classrooms. And the circulation in that facility wasn't the greatest for security reasons and so forth. But there were ways that we could do it, and it was really actually quite cost effective. The only issue that I find, well, there are many issues, right? There are always challenges that we try to see how we can overcome them, is trying to make sure that we find the right mix where we can locate close enough to residential areas. Well, one thing that's nice about this comprehensive plan study in Reston is that you've got a balance of both of those. And the opportunities may present themselves, but you're absolutely spot on in that the desire is to make it so it's walkable, so it's located near mixed use and residential. So it really presents itself some challenges. And where the Park Authority has property and where they try to locate, that's why I keep saying commingling may be our way of the future of working our way through that. But you raise excellent points. Those are issues that have to be looked at and addressed and discussed fully. We generally don't discuss our land or site acquisition and our negotiations, even with the Park Authority, when we're going through it. And I think that day is pretty much over. And I think we need to have more communication and collaboration with communities to see about wherein lies the best placement and location to meet the needs and to really serve the community.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
All right, thank you, Gary. And thank you, Jeff, for that great response. Jennifer next, and then John Mooney.
Thanks for the presentation. And I know that you will probably receive your presentation after the evening is out, and it had some links, I think you said, to the setup of each school, like how much land is required, those types of things, which are not currently in the Reston Comprehensive Plan. But outside of school buildings themselves to fit kids in classes, the recreation facilities that FCPS provides is huge in comparison to what we would get from like a Fairfax County Parks Authority. And so I was wondering if we should address that in this version of the comprehensive plan as to how many recreation spaces, fields, I would imagine in particular, will need for our students in addition to the actual school buildings themselves.
Yeah, excellent question. We do have that as a part of our educational specifications. We talk about the programming and the placement of fields and the usage of that. We've been working with the Park Authority, as you know, or maybe you don't know, 70 to 80% of our after and evening use is by the Park Authority and the rec center and the adult and youth leagues. And our facilities are pretty much booked, they're pretty much open and used from 7:30 in the morning till around 10 o'clock in the evening. And the secondary schools are even more so. It's almost 24/7. But the amazing thing is that takes a big wear and tear on the facilities. Not only the ability to clean them, of course, every evening, but really over time. And that's why with a renovation cycle currently at 37 years on the average before we get back, based upon that $180 million spend, it's tough to actually get there. But to your point, fields are an incredible important aspect. And when I was speaking about repurposing facilities, that's one of the challenges is, generally speaking, when you look at an existing facility, a lot of those were developed for other uses and the fields weren't a part of it. They weren't planned for, and they're not certainly in close location or even available. So we absolutely need green spaces like that. We know that with the tourism committee and the sports and tourism committees, they've taken a look at use and field availability, that we've got to constantly be working together to make sure we're providing enough field space for outdoor use and for recreational play as well. And I think both the natural aspects of it, that's one of the things that we've been working with the county on to provide more natural space and sustainable space, as well as playing fields as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I have one additional question, but if you guys could provide us some rough counts of the types of fields or types of facilities, recreation fields that you guys would need, that would be really helpful, especially as we consider placemaking. And kind of speaking of placemaking, 2025 for the new elementary school is creeping up. And so doing things, I would say, between like now and 2030 to identify where exactly these facilities might go would also be helpful to, I think, this version of the comprehensive plan, because there's only so much space left in Reston to go around, and we certainly need school locations for our kids. That can't be something we give up. Thank you for allowing me to comment, and thank you for sharing your information.
Well, and I really appreciate your comment. One thing I might add is, we have field space that's our property right now, but the community uses it for soccer fields on so much, at so much use. And my experience has been that when we talk about, oh, hey, we're going to have to go ahead and take away all of these fields that the Park Authority and the rec group have been using, so we can build a school, and we're going to have to tear down the elementary school next to it and build a vertical school, that goes over like a lead balloon right now. And so to your point, we've got to maintain the fields we have, and we've got to look, and that's why I keep talking about the co-location with the Park Authority, because I really do believe that that's a partnership that we've got to explore further, and work together on using the most efficient use of our land that we do have. So excellent point. Thank you for the question.
Jeff, thank you. And Jeff, I did not realize that 70%, is that what you said? Basically, the fields are used by others beyond the school system. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes, sir, Supervisor Alcorn. And we have, it's a big revenue generator for the neighborhood and community services by their use. They do pay us for some use, but it's minimal. In our community use that we have, we garner over $3 million a year. And that's just to pay for custodial cleaning, really.
All right, great, thank you. Now we've got 4 more questions. We'll get through those, and then we do need to move on. We've got Lynn Malston, followed by Mark Looney, then Myra Callahan, and we'll end it with our school board member, Melanie Marin.
Thank you, Walter, and thank you so much, Melanie. And the presentation that you did, Jeff, was awesome. And I just wanted to make a comment that Reston does provide resources to the Fairfax County school system, especially through the offer of their golf courses. So there are 2 golf courses in Reston. The South course serves as the home course for South Lakes High School, and Hidden Creek Country Club serves as the home course for McLean High School. And I just want to say how wonderful it is to see the kids out playing and competing against each other. And Walter knows this, and others on this task force know that I did used to serve as the golf coach for the girls golf team at South Lakes. So that open space is very much appreciated. And I hope that you all appreciate the contribution that the community is making to the high schools as well.
Absolutely, and I'm sorry for leaving that out, because that's a great point. It is through all of us working together to make our communities so vibrant, really.
All right, thank you, Lynn. Let's go to Mark Looney, then Myra Callahan, then Melanie.
Thanks, Walter. My 2 questions really build off of Jennifer's questions, and they are: how far in advance do you start the process of identifying sites for new schools? And what's the preferred acreage or size of the either parcel or facility that you'd like to have as you scout out new elementary and high school sites?
Yeah, great question. The timing of that, it usually takes, depending on the size of the facility, elementary, middle, or high. It usually takes a year really to go through the legislative process and almost 2 years in the design. So it's usually 3 years in advance of the beginning of the construction. And the construction can take 2 years in and of itself. So depending on the size of the facility. So it really is 5 years in advance that we've got to be, perfect world, identifying where we have impacts and where we think we're going to be able to start planning for the needs of the future. And that's why I like our CIP, because the annual review of that keeps us focused on what we see is coming up. But you had another question. I want to go ahead and get to that.
Yeah, so the other question was, what are the preferred acreage? But I guess as a follow-up to that answer, I didn't hear you discuss, I'll call it identification and land acquisition timing and how long it takes to actually, put a site under contract or obtain ownership of it, or, how do you go about working with landowners to figure out where you want to go, understanding that there's a geography that you have in mind? How do you engage with the property owners to actually acquire the right of the land as opposed to just sort of the construction costs?
Yeah, excellent. And two things. First, I'll go ahead and talk about the acreage. And this is minimal sizes now, okay? So the minimal size for an elementary school is required usually 10 acres plus 1 per 100 students. So if you have an elementary school that's 950 elementary students, then you have really 19 acres, 20 acres that you would like. And that's usable acres for circulation that doesn't have a lot of stormwater wetlands areas that you have to protect, or RMP. And then, so that's 10 per and plus 100. And then middle school is generally 20 to 30 plus 1 per 100. And then high schools can be 40 to 50 because of parking and fields and all the things we talked about, plus 1 per 100 students. So you can get up to a desired saying 70 acres and where are you going to find that? You're not going to find 70 vacant acres for a high school. And that's why we've been going vertical on a lot of ours, because spaces is a premium. Now, in terms of when we actually go through negotiation, a lot of those, there are a number of different ways that can occur. What's been so beneficial about working with Supervisor Alcorn and the Planning Commissioner, Mr. Carter, and so forth, and with Ms. Marin's work, is really making sure that we're talking about when these things are happening. And that's why this planning study and taking a look at that in the impact areas, when we start talking with developers, we start talking about the impacts that they have, and they come to realize that in the comprehensive plan, when we talk about features that they need to address, this is one of the areas that Supervisor Alcorn has been really pressing in his prior role. And it's so we can get that conversation going, so they can identify land, so they can work with us to identify a place for where that may occur. Now, that negotiation, sometimes in the old days, it used to come, as I mentioned, in terms of a proffer of the land itself. Now it comes in a form of the balance of the development contributions, but also with financial contributions. And it really has to become really a math equation from the school system or from the county, working with the developer with their contribution and our purchase, the balance between that and the right mix. And that process usually goes on during the initial phases of their submittal of whatever plan that they may have, what their initial layouts and designs are. They generally reach out to county staff and reach out to the supervisors, or who reaches out to the supervisor's office to make sure not only they are aware, but also that they're addressing the concerns as identified in the comp plan and in any transitional area or study area that we're talking about. The last way to really get a facility is through eminent domain, and that's the most undesirable way. And that becomes there's a formal legislative process with that. It has a lot of legal ramifications and can really drag on. But that hasn't been used in some time. We did with the Bailey's Upper facility, we did go ahead and provide them notice of our intent to potentially exercise the eminent domain. But that was because that building was abandoned, had gone through foreclosure, was swooped up in what's called a RIT, a real estate investment trust, by a group out in New York. And the group that was managing the property that was local wasn't really interested in losing their revenue generation source from managing a vacant property. But once we finally found out who the owner was, they were willing to go ahead and release that property for the assessed value and sell it to the school system. So I know I answered it in really kind of a myriad of ways, but each really agreement or each site is somewhat unique in their process. And in the case of what we're talking about in the planning area, it would be working with the Board of Supervisor member, in this case, Supervisor Alcorn, the county staff, trying to find the right mix with the developer and looking at how we can all come together to a win-win solution.
All right, Jeff, thank you. Thank you, Mark. Let's go to Myra Callahan.
Yeah, I've got just a couple comments and thoughts. One of the first things I was thinking about is a couple of years ago, I worked with somebody, can't remember his name, he's retired now. I think I want to say Kevin Sneed, maybe. And I remember he used to work to kind of like fill every tiny little crevice of school with students. And I know that outlook will probably change in light of COVID. I mean, even now we have no idea, what is going to happen next year, if there's going to be variants. We just kind of really don't know. We're still in a little bit of an uncertain period, in my opinion. And I know of many neighbors who have pulled out and put their kids in private school, and I don't see them changing, putting them back in Fairfax County Public Schools now, and that they've been in school with, other students and engaged for a year. But I do like the idea of collaboration with Fairfax County Park Authority. I do know that Barron Cameron was a school site at one point, and that I still see could be used again before they start, filling it up with soccer fields of turf, but something to think about. I like the idea of repurposing an office if you could find a way to do that, maybe for a high school, maybe in the TSA area. The other thing I wanted to say about collaborating with public facilities, I think it may be mentioned in the comp plan. I'd have to go back and look, but at one point they were talking about collaboration with the library, and I am opposed to that because schools often have lockdowns, and I'm not a fan of collaborating in a public building if it's used for other things. I just don't think that's a good idea for a safety standpoint. But I want to go back to just a couple of questions. Jose, if you could provide us after this meeting, Jeff's numbers, and remember the week that we had that big chart that came about population growth, and it was quite an alarming presentation about where we saw Reston, if this happened, if that happened. It was a table, and that was kind of where I started thinking, my gosh, we don't have enough enough schools planned. So if you could provide Jeff's numbers so I could see a side by side of those two together, and that would be helpful. But I wanted to ask you, Jeff, boundary changes. I understand that it's not popular, but that is a way to address overpopulated schools. Is that something that would possibly be considered?
Absolutely, and thanks for all the questions. And I really like and really hope to have your support in pushing for the Barron Cameron. That sounds like a great idea for not only field space, but also a high school location would be perfect. But anyway, I digress. So anyway,
yeah, I don't disagree with you, and I live right there.
Yeah,
I just
so
that was
thank
what it was
you.
initially meant to be.
Yeah. But yeah, to your point, we have been talking about boundary policy. It's one of the things that the needs for the seats are not in the spaces where we have the capacity in our schools. So the schools that are under capacity, the school board has been saying that we need to take a look at going ahead and revamping our boundary policies. And this has been a conversation going on for some time. So the school board voted to go ahead and get a boundary consultant to come in who started their work, and that work had been put on hold because of COVID, obviously. But they and it currently still is on hold. I don't know when it's going to actually come back. They had their work was to go ahead and develop surveys to send them out to the communities to get their feedback, to go ahead and report that to the school board, and then to go out and do listening tours to hear the community's feedback about what would be willing to bear, what the interests are, what should the criteria of the policy be, And we're awaiting that policy before we undertake any new, and this is a key word, any new boundary adjustments. And the reason why I say that is we had some legacy boundary adjustments that were in the CIP that the board approved for us to go ahead and conclude. One of those was Shrevewood. Another one was McLean Langley. And the CIP mentions it, I think on page 43, or it's pretty close to that page. And so the school board agreed to go ahead and continue those while we awaited the work from the boundary consultant. I don't know the timeline of when that boundary consultant work will be finished for the school board policy to be updated, because it's going to be a totally transparent process to ensure that when we do go through the process of doing boundary adjustments, we'll be able to accommodate them. But I can tell you, yeah, for this planning area, for this study area, however, I don't know that a boundary adjustment would, when any new school happens, and we talk about the new elementary school in Town Center North, in Central Sunrise Valley District, Innovation Center areas, new schools, each time there's a new school, there is a boundary adjustment that takes a look at where the collection, where the catchment area, if you will, is for the students that will be attending that. So there will be those adjustments that will occur as a part of a process of these new schools. It will be taking a look at the areas that they're going to be serving, but also it really allows for an innovative or creative way to address boundaries because you have the benefit of the new facility. Not only taking into account the catchment area, the impact area, but also fixing anything that may be a little off that's evolved, and I say sometimes devolved over time. So great questions, and really, I appreciate it.
Well, don't be afraid to change boundaries. I know that a lot of people go, oh my gosh, it's like a political nightmare, but I do feel as though, from an economic standpoint, not only having to build new facilities versus a boundary change, or, busing. You've got people who are living practically in Herndon who are being bused all the way to Langley, which makes no sense, but that's a political nightmare. But I think you need people who are brave enough to take on that challenge.
And I will say one last, I'm sorry, Supervisor Alcorn, and I'll just finish with this. What we've realized is that we've got to start the conversation about the catchment area at the elementary level, and to let communities build into it. We're not shy, this board's not shy about it. They've stated that all along, but they want to do it from an equitable lens, and the legacy system that we had just wasn't as equitable as the new approach. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Myra, thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Tammy, do you have a quick comment? Let me, because then I want to finish with Melanie Marin. We're running a little bit behind schedule.
Thank you. I do. And Jeff, you're going to hate my guts. I want to speak just a warning, just an observation. The idea that elementary schools have no outside place for little bitty kids and through 6th grade to run around, scream and yell and get out of the chair, stop being in a line and being civilized, get out and be a kid, in my mind is critical. And I am not a big fan of the McNair site that has taken away most of that space for little kids. And I know you have to do it. I know your job is impossible, but education, I'm back to biophilia. Get people into nature. We gotta provide that for little kids. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tammy. Melanie, let's have you wrap up on this topic. Thank you very much again, you and Jeff, for being here tonight. It's a very, very good conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Plattenberg. So there were just a few comments I felt compelled to speak to, and then I was originally going to just ask Mr. Plattenberg to speak to a question I get a lot, which is, why can't FCPS just buy vacant space? Like, there are all these hotels that are out of business, or conference space. So Mr. Plattenberg, I'd love if in a moment you could please speak to that answer and why we can or cannot. But I do just want to address the last 3 comments that were made. I'll start with the ones that concern me a bit more. One was about choosing a location for new facilities based on it being a park. A cautionary tale would be what happened with Blake Lane. So if those of you don't know, I'm sure you could get filled in on another time, but it's not always as simple as plunking down a building on park space. Secondly, I'm really sad to hear the pushback about cohabitating, co-locating schools with other functions. Our children go through lockdown drills because there are active shooters trying to kill children. And if that's an inconvenience that someone doesn't want to have, like, we need to take a step back and just remember the role of our kids in our communities. Like, they live here too. So whether it's office space, like the Board of Supervisors does a great job at co-locating office space with the fire department. And when we did walk around some facilities seeing, could we put a supervisor space or a school board office space in a school? I mean, it could be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be a whole library. But I just, you know, this pattern of us keeping kids in their school, in their place, rather than engaging with the community of multi-generational and all the interactions, like, there's a huge benefit to that. So I really encourage people to open up their minds to that and figure out how to reduce the gun violence. That's the problem. It's not kids, it's the gun violence. So I just felt compelled to share that. And then lastly, Miss Patrine, is it? Jeff and I are on that same page with you for outdoor learning space. A silver lining of the pandemic has been that we now have 50 more outdoor learning spaces covered by tents. So he knows that I am very passionate about that, and we are working and we want to budget more funds so we can train educators on how to create outdoor learning spaces and outdoor play spaces. We're also working on middle school recess. So just wanted to share that, and I'd love to connect with you after that since you seem very passionate about that. So, so I'll leave it at that. And Mr. Plattenberg, thanks for answering that question about use of vacant commercial space.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Melanie. Appreciate you coming here and sharing your comments and really serving us all on the school board for Hunter Mills. So thank you very much. Jeff, thank you. Fantastic presentation, discussion. I would ask that as task force members have comments or questions, feel free to reach out to Jose. He can gather those and get in touch with Jeff or Melanie for that matter. But yes, let's do move on. And again, thank you very much. And as you all have suggestions on specific language for updating the comprehensive plan for Reston, please don't hesitate to share that. Okay.
Walter, I do want to clarify something because I am a teacher. So I do want to clarify the library comment, which was mine. My understanding of shared library was that it was going to be a shared library, like the students would go into the library and you'd have the public in the same space, which I do see a problem from a lockdown standpoint, because if something happened in that public library where you're sharing the actual facility, it does become a problem as a teacher to try and figure how to get your students extricated. And so that's what I was thinking, but maybe I misunderstand what it means to share a space of a public library. So that's my comment on that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Moira. All right. So again, Melanie, Jeff, thank you very much. Appreciate it. At this point, going to turn it over to John Carter for the next item on the agenda. This is very exciting. We're actually going to start talking about some land use issues on whatever meeting this is of the Comprehensive Plan Task Force for Reston. So John, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about convenience centers, village centers, and perhaps some other areas outside of the TSAs.
So this is a joint venture. She doesn't know this yet, but Lynn Molston is working on this as well. As we know, this is not the John Carter plan. This is the community's plan. As you also know, I'm willing to put in my 2 cents when I think it's appropriate. So Lynn, help me out as we move forward. So we're just going to do the convenience centers and village centers. And we don't have anything written. We're going to do this a little differently. We're going to get your ideas first, and then we're going to write it. So these two are probably the easiest ones to do, particularly starting with the convenience centers. Now, one is we're going to change the process, or recommend that we change the process. Today, particularly the village centers, they can go forward with limited process. What we're going to do is change that process, so they're going to have to go through a plan amendment to get buildings in both the convenience centers and the village centers. And I think, St. Clair, do you have those maps for the convenience centers? Here we go. So there are 3 of them. There are 3 convenience centers: Lake Newport, Fairways, Sunrise Valley Drive, and Soapstone. Actually, that's 4. There are 4 convenience centers today. They're allowed to have consider 0.25 FAR. That 0.25 is approximately where they are today. The 0.25 would add perhaps a small additional amount of FAR. No residential. And so that makes it pretty simple for these 4 cases. There's Lake Newport is a little unknown. That RA probably should enter into that in terms of what they need. But the other, Fairways, Sunrise Valley Drive, and Soapstone, should be straightforward. Then I'd like to add a new one, and it's called Tall Oaks. Let's take it out of the village center, because it's never going to be a village center. It's almost complete today, and put that into the village center and make that 0.25 with no additional residential contemplated. So
John, you mean put it in the convenience center list.
Put it in the convenience center.
Yeah.
Did I say village center? But yeah,
that's
put
okay.
it in the, take it out of the village center and put it into the convenience center, which is what it is. It's actually, in the end, I think it's going to be a fairly nice one, actually. It's got a little bit of office and a little bit of retail in there with appropriate amounts of parking, and probably pretty well located for that Tall Oaks community. So that's, if you like that, then we'll talk Lynn or somebody, or maybe even myself, to come back and write this up. I think the existing comp plan is pretty close, so there's probably not a whole lot of rewriting for those, except for the Lake Newport one, and we'll ask RA about that. So are there any comments about that? I hate to move fast, but I think that's a simple one.
John, this is Mark Looney. One quick question on the Tall Oaks component. Yes. Do you know where you would draw the boundaries of the convenience center and what the resulting existing FAR would be when you draw those boundaries? And the reason I ask is, if you're excluding the new residential from the land area, it necessarily affects the denominator such that the numerator may end up with a greater than 0.25 FAR. And I'd hate for that to get into a situation where it's non-conforming with the comprehensive plan from the get-go. So I agree with the concept, but I would double check the resulting FAR before you assign a number to it.
I think that's a good point, and we will also recheck all of the others to make sure I'm right. What I've laid out for you is the intention of where we're going to go, but then we'll have to do individual write-ups within that intention to make sure it works. But the boundary for Tall Oaks would be just the commercial area, including that open space and all the parking lot, as well, obviously, the buildings. So hopefully that's within the 0.25. If it's not, we'll figure out the appropriate level. But each one of these, we want just a little bit of potential, so a little bit of changes would be possible, but not big changes to any of them. Anything else? So we'll move on to village centers.
John, this is Lynn.
Yes.
I just wanted to reiterate my support, and I'm on board. I'm helping out any way I can.
Well, hopefully you're going to lead this as much as I am. So.
Okay, I'll lead it.
Village centers.
I'm on
Village
board
centers.
too. I'm on board too. I like the idea of keeping it to 2.25 for the village centers, because that is how we keep the population down. That is the one tool that we have that we can work with to stop the 157,000 people in Reston and keep it to a more workable number and feasible number for transportation, schools, and all of that.
Okay, I appreciate that comment because now you've set the magic word, which is village centers. So unless there's more comments, I'll go ahead and do the village centers.
John, before we
Yes.
move on, Jennifer Juszczyk asked a question in the chat on what is Plaza America considered to be?
Plaza America is part of the TSA, so it's all it is part of the TSA. It's not considered a village center or a convenience center.
Thank you.
Okay, the village centers. So we have 4. We have Lake Ann, Hunters Woods, South Lakes, and North Point. And again, we're getting rid of Tall Oaks as a village center. Lake Ann, we would leave alone, but basically keep the language that's in the comp plan today. Hunters Woods, South Lakes, and North Point. Now, there was some confusion in the last plan about what the boundaries are. And I know Mark is sensitive to this, and I am as well. So we're just talking about the commercial area of those 3 areas, and the density applies just to the commercial area because we know they're surrounded by residential, and that's part of the PRC area, which is separate from the village centers. So what we want, again, the process, so this would take a plan amendment to do much of anything on those 3 sites. We would keep the commercial FAR at 0.25, which is what it is today. And so that allows a little bit of development of each one of those, very small. And that's a good thing to allow them to expand or contract in different ways. But it's within the limitations. You would hardly notice it. The question now is what to do with the residential. Now, and this is my perspective, I think that there's some confusion in the existing plan of what the density is. It really doesn't say. And without that, I mean, what I think should be, they should not be the same density as the transit station areas. The transit station areas are 50 units and above. And so we should not do that in the village center. You can imagine what that, you can visualize that if you look at the new Fannie Mae building, that's a pretty good sized building, and we probably don't want those marching around in our village centers. So I would take the next level down, which is the 15 to 20 units per acre for each of those village centers. Now we'll have to go through these individually and make sure this works. But my notion is that they would be 13 to 20, and that would be the range you have to play with. Then we're going to take the Walter Alcorn notion, which is you must earn your density. You just don't get that. So we'd start with the principles, and we don't have this laid out quite yet, but you'd start with the principles. And if you're going to develop at some point in the future, and you're going to go through all this process of a new comp plan amendment, to get the higher end of that range, the 13 to 20, you must meet all of those, all of the planning principles and any other criteria that we write in the plan. So let's see, I'm looking at my chart. That's pretty much covers them. I know that's pretty cryptic. The language isn't too bad for the village centers. So I think we can keep that mostly. We just want to be a little clearer on the density. The density already is 0.25, and the housing is somewhat unspecified, I'll say. And we could specify that in sort of a range, and that you just don't get the range. You've got to earn your way. So that kind of, if you like that, we should have sort of a vision statement for all of these. What is a village center? And Robert Simon wrote this language long ago, and we can probably just crib that language. I think of what a village center, it has a gathering space. It has a mix of retail. It has some housing, but not too much housing. That's what a village center is. And then a little specificity for each one of the individual plans. So if you like the general direction that's going, Lynn will write it up, or somebody will write it up.
I will write it
So,
up.
any comments? Okay,
Don, you have a couple hands. I
good.
see Jason, Gary, Mark Looney, and Moira.
Yes.
We can start with Jason, I guess, and then work our way down.
All right, I'm here. Hello, everyone. A couple points on that. Thank you for the analysis. I would say we're not necessarily going at this wrong direction, but I think it would be helpful to have a fuller conversation around what we want the village centers to be and what kind of amenities that we want to see. Do we want to see new public open spaces? Do we want to see viable retail? 0.25 FAR doesn't support a lot, and 13 to 20 dwelling units per acre really isn't that much. And I think without being able to see what that looks like and understanding the impacts of how much density can provide how much amenity, we're just throwing numbers out there. I hear a lot of we should nots and we don't supports from people on the task force, but I don't want to ascribe that to how I feel necessarily. So I feel like we could look at this a little differently and try to think about what the neighborhood should be and what their role is. And is some infill redevelopment a good thing without people being able to see what that looks like and the ultimate impact of that? I think we're just throwing numbers around. You know, one good rule of thumb to keep in mind is 1,000 residential units within a 5-minute walk, quarter mile, can support one block of Main Street retail. And that depends on area median income. But in this area, 1,000 residential units, and we should be looking at what is the holistic neighborhood? Are we creating complete neighborhoods? And then what is the FAR that we need to achieve the amenities that we want that neighborhood to have? So those are my 2 cents.
I agree with a lot of that. In fact, we might change the title to this whole chapter. It's the land use and design chapter. Whether we'll be able to come up with designs for each of the village centers, I'm not sure about that. But if we don't do that, we will have good images of what they should be like. But I agree with what you're saying, and I think that's one of the things that was lacking in the last comp plan, that we're just throwing numbers around. I think you'll find that those numbers are fitting, but the proof is in seeing it. I recognize that. But I like
Walter, I'd like to be part of this conversation if it does go offline.
Yeah. Next.
I believe that was Gary Maupin. Gary?
Gary.
I think I was the last one to raise my hand. I'm gonna let the others go first. And like Mark had his hand up.
Mark Looney?
I'll just jump in and ask a question, John, to clarify so that I understood what you were saying. Is it that there would be no recommendation in the current plan for mixed use in the commercial areas? And then if they came forward, the maximum density would be 13 to 20 to the acre on the residential side? Is that in lieu of the commercial? Is it in addition to the commercial? I guess to Jason's question, like how do you deal with the mix of uses and in that environment? In other words, when is the plan amendment required and what can you apply for?
Well, I guess without thinking it through, which is always dangerous, you could go to the 0.225 without a plan amendment. If you want to add residential, then you contemplate a plan amendment. And the residential at 13 to 20 would be in addition to the 0.25 of commercial.
So you're just in round numbers, 13 to 20 is roughly a townhouse density as opposed to a multifamily density.
Probably a little higher, Probably at the low side of the multifamily would, and then when you combine it with the commercial, now you've got a different frame.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm thinking is, and maybe this is where the disconnect is that Jason was talking about, which is if you're going to require a plan amendment, what's the benefit of prescribing the upper limitations of that, or the upper creativity of that plan amendment ahead of time, as opposed to figuring it out based on the merits of what you're proposing. I mean, I can understand the notion that, look, we want to say that the village centers are fixed in place until you come forward with a vision, but why limit the vision if you can make it work?
Well, I think the vision says you don't want them as high density as the transit station areas. That seems to be beyond the pale and probably doesn't fit. So you need to have some direction. And so it seems like the next one down is the 13 to 20. You know, in
Right.
comparison to say Lake Anne, which is way below that even. Lake Anne has less than 160 units in its all of its commercial, which is a pretty large commercial area, and it does have not quite the 0.25. So that's kind of the image that we're looking for here.
Right. I mean, and I won't belabor it because we'll look at the language when it comes out. But I mean, the Lake Anne redevelopment zoning approvals was much more dense than 160 units. Now, obviously, the market didn't support it at that level, but it was the whole point of the Lake Anne redevelopment proposal was to add residential to support the commercial, because the commercial was suffering without that. And I guess that's really my driving point, which is it'd be fine to say it ought to be less dense than the TSAs, and I'm totally on board with that concept. But I don't know that we can project out and say 13 to 20 is the right mix to re-envision these things 30 years from now, or 20 years from now, or 10 years from now, whenever it ends up being.
Well, let's see what the language produces.
Yeah.
I get your point, but let's see what the language produces, and each one is going to be a little bit different as well. But we need to start somewhere.
I think Gary was next.
I was just going to say that when I look at the existing numbers in the village centers and go to those village centers, the numbers are extremely high at 50. And I think they would be high at the 13 to 20 range. It was a comment and me talking to people, you know, over the period of time here about the vision of those centers, and the numbers that are in there just don't match and need to be taken down from what I see. And going back to Jan's comment earlier, that tracks to her comment as well. That was it.
I know we should show it and prove it to you, but the 50, it's not close. You can't get it to fit. If you use the Heron House, that's 60 units. So some of these are up to 700 and 800 units at 50 units per acre. So you're talking about 10 to 12 Heron houses on each of these village centers. That probably doesn't fit. Anyway, but I think all those comments are good, and I think seeing this is a good exercise, and we'll be able to come to some ranges, I think, that work.
John, if it's helpful, I think we have a couple more hands.
Good.
So we got Chris Daniel, Jan, Bill Penniman, and I don't know if Mark Looney put a new hand or maybe that's previous hand. Chris.
Sure. I mean, I think mine will be pretty straightforward. I think I agree with the concept. I think a key principle I kind of agree earlier talking about trying to highlight something about public space. That's been a common theme about this task force, is dedicating and highlighting the need for some open public space, not just a corporate owned space. So that's my only comment.
That was a Robert Simon comment. These should have gathering spaces in each one of these.
Jan?
Okay, me? Okay, I'm up. All right. So gathering space, the villages have a special feel that I would hate to see disrupted by high density. Also, there's parking. For example, at Hunter's Woods, we've got the Reston Community Center there, and the Southgate Community Center is not that far away. So talk about amenities. You can't get any better than the Reston Community Center. And I don't think you need to worry about people looking for them there. The parking is important because that parking also serves the Reston Community Center. It serves the stores, it serves retail and commerce, and it serves Reston Community Center. So you don't want to be building and shrinking the parking lot because it's just barely adequate as it is. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan.
Good
I
comment.
think Bill Penniman was the last one.
Oh, okay. John, I just wanted to voice strong agreement with your concept that any change will require a plan amendment, any significant change to a village center. That way it assures that there will be full community opportunity to participate, notice, and everything else. Having said that, I think Mark Looney is right that it's best not to put in a specific number as to what the upper limit is. The problem Lake Ann had was 160 units wasn't enough. Bob Simon originally proposed 5 tall buildings, not 3. And I don't know what the right answer is going to be 5 years from now or 10 years from now, but just having that public plan amendment process assures that any proposal will get amply vetted by the neighbors. And it might end up being a higher number if they get a lot of really good amenities as a result. Thanks.
Good.
Thanks, Bill. I think we have one last hand.
Direction from everybody. I like the direction from everybody, and I like seeing these things. I like knowing what we're going to get, and I like solving these problems.
David Vanell, I think, was the last hand. Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Jose. I just to remind everybody about what fits in a village center. A couple of years ago, a developer came in with a proposal for what amounted to a high-rise, but a very dense structure of apartments co-located with and partly supplanting a cluster of garden-style townhomes, stick-built garden-style townhomes to the northeast of North Point Village Center. And it after a lot of toing and froing, it just kind of landed like a lead balloon. So whatever we settle on, and I'm in kind of in agreement with Bill and Mark that let's not say this is the upper limit, but we need to make sure that whatever is allowed to go in there under a plan amendment is compatible with the space. And I am of the opinion that TSA density doesn't belong in a village center. But anyway, I think the important thing is that the neighborhoods must be involved in responding to this, to whatever plan amendment comes into whatever village center. Thanks.
Okay.
All right.
Could I just
Well,
add
John, thank
something?
you.
Well,
Yes.
sorry.
Go right ahead,
Could I
Lynn,
just
and then we'll
add
wrap up.
something to David's remark? You know, I want to talk about Tall Oaks Village Center and the community that came out and participated in town hall meetings. They made their wishes known and it was ignored. So, you know, I think that you need that works both ways. We had a very engaged community that was very vocal, and they participated in the process, and it was all for naught. So thank you.
Glenn, thank you. Thank you for adding that. I do want to move on. There is one other thing that I want to make sure we don't miss in talking about non-TSA areas. John Carter, there were also, and this was something I think David mentioned, St. John's Woods and a couple of other places, right? Let's make sure that we get that on the list and come back to those. John, what else do we have on that list?
Well, we have some people call them hotspots. So it's St. John's Woods, Charter Oaks, and Fairway Apartments. Those are all have been part of various development schemes. So we should know a little bit more about that. Then we're probably going to have to leave some additional housing units for the entire non-TSA area. I'm not sure what number or how even to figure that out, but we probably shouldn't leave that with nothing, with zero. So that would be the next steps. And then we move to North Town Center and then each of the transit station areas. That would be our outline of land use. And we'll total the numbers up as we go, starting from the bottom. I don't know what the overall number is. We're going to total it up as we go.
It's simple as pie, right, John?
Very simple. We're going to try it that way.
No, thank you very much.
I know we're moving fast. I know we're moving fast on, but I thought it was a good approach to sort of talk this out a little bit before we start writing and get all exercised about one set of words versus another set of words. I think we know where the issues are, and we can write this now. At least the convenience centers and the village centers.
One extra thing, may I bring up one category?
Yeah, Tammy, go right ahead.
Yes, we are not talking at all about the big, giant complexes of affordable housing that are about to need to be redeveloped that we are desperately trying to keep. And that is, I don't even know how to approach that, but it needs to be covered.
Well, that goes into the other category, I guess, that we're going to leave some units. I also forgot another area. There are two areas, commercial areas. One is the Home Depot complex, all of that. And the other one is Bowman Green.
Right. Good. Very good. All right. Anything else for that list before we move on?
Walter?
Yeah, Bruce.
Yeah, no, before we go beyond, and I know we touched on it, but I'll just get my first shot at the hot spot at St. John's Wood. That was for reasons that we could discuss, not left as built, as even though it's in the neighborhood. And I'm going to be a strong advocate to returning it to as-built status, not singling it out as a hotspot.
All right. Thank you, Bruce. You make a good point there. All right. We will be coming back in a couple weeks on that. Any final thoughts?
My only final thought is that when you're talking about developing Lake Anne, Lake Anne is, most of the businesses are eateries, they're restaurants. They're not really shops per se. Restaurants, and then you can go to the Reston used bookstore. We have the Reston Community Center there, but as far as people going to shop and making that high density for that reason, it isn't there.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Other final comments before we move on? Okay, now we have 21 minutes until the time I said we were going to finish, but with everybody's permission, if we could go to 9:15, let's do that. Let's do that. I just shaved 4 minutes off your estimated time, John Mooney, but John, see what you can do, and then we'll work on open space and parks at a future meeting. So, John Mooney, I'm turning it over to you.
You're
John,
muted, John.
you there?
Uh-oh.
Unmuted.
You're
Thank
good.
you, Walter. Jose, could you please put up the little PowerPoint on where we hope to go in this section of the meeting? So I'll start. As Jose's putting it up, our goal tonight is to approve a base text of the entire transportation chapter so that the task force can fully pivot to land use issues as described by John and other issues. So we want to substantially put it to bed, at least towards a base text. However, tonight you can add your comments, which we will capture and annotate to the text. You can do it by chat now or later by email to us all by listserv. And then later in the process, we can make tweaks in the transportation chapter based on those comments. Okay. Next slide. So I'm already doing point number one, the intro. The second part will be a discussion and vote on the overall chapter on transportation, less the transportation management section, which Jennifer will lead. And obviously, we now have only 20 minutes for that. And then thirdly, a discussion and vote on the transportation management section, led by me, 20 minutes. And as you all know, Gary Malpin very generously agreed that we would focus only on one version tonight, that done by Bill Penniman and me. For both fairness and to be able to finish this is the proposed rules for process. Very limited speaker time for each section. It's now down probably to 15 minutes for each section. The order of speakers, Jose is going to both recognize people and time people. So we'll start with the non-transportation connectivity working group task force members, then the transportation connectivity working group members, and then general public, because we in the PCWG have spoken a lot about this. We want others to have a chance. Limited time for each speaker, please, only 1 minute. We're not going to make it if we don't do that. So please be as concise as possible, and everyone gets to speak only once. Does that work? Okay. So Jennifer, you want to take it away? And
Yes,
thank you.
I can take it away, and I'm sure. Yeah. Hey, thank you, Jose. Let's hook the meet up. Okay, so we had 95% of this chapter before you all at a previous meeting, and we took some of your comments and resolved them. And then I also had some additional comments that were added here this weekend, I think it was, and I went ahead and added those.
Yeah, I did.
Yes, Jen, I know. I remember you did too. So, I just want to quickly go through what the changes are. One is Jen is suggesting that we take some keen eyes and wordsmith this little area where it talks about what transportation is going to address as far as communities. We were adding visitors also to this section, and then the next one here is we wanted to talk not only in the transportation section of just Reston people, but also those that travel between Reston and surrounding areas, which we think we did in the overall text, but just not in the intro. And then we took these principles, which you all have seen several times now, and we made some stronger language tweaks to them based on some, I think it was Barbara Byron that got on last time and explained the legal ease of different words you can use. So we actively changed some of these words to stronger language where we thought it was applicable. And then we added an additional principle down here about equity and also speaking to some physical limitations and using things like universal design, which is already in the Fairfax County plan. And that's right now just kind of a placeholder until the equity group potentially reviews this language or comes up with better language for us to input here. And then I did some minor tweaking to things that I thought were the wrong word, or there were spaces, or there were periods where they weren't supposed to. So you'll see some of those are minor. Jan is suggesting that we increase, it looks like, some speed limits from 35 to 40. So those are some small tweaks. And that was on things like Reston Parkway and Barron Cameron to increase it by 5 miles an hour. And then places like Wheelie, Sunset Hills, and Sunrise to increase it by 5 miles per hour. And let's see, on collector streets, she's taking out parking is optional. Those are those neighborhood streets. And it looks like increasing the speed limits a little bit there. So we'll have to consult with our transportation experts and see if these line up with VDOT and FCDOT miles per hour. So we'll verify that for you guys. So moving on, let's see what else we changed. We added some things about lighting to this table because it was already in the text. And so I was just reading through all of the text and trying to make sure that the table matched the text. And there was a difference someone had mentioned on Reston Parkway. They thought the text didn't match. And so I was making that match in a few areas. This was something we had addressed in the task force, and it ended up getting stuck in the chart. So I just took it out. Let's see. This is one that I was not able to resolve from our last discussion. So I wanted to ask those in the task force if anyone has an example of this. So on bikeways, and it says, in the TSA, village centers and neighborhoods shall be connected through an extensive system of separated cycle tracks, on-street bike lanes, off-street, multi-use paths, and shared roadways. And so the question came about is where has this been done poorly or not at all? And because we want to make sure that we have some equity, but I am not a transportation expert. And so I was going to rely on some of my fellow transportation subcommittee members to potentially give us an idea. And I thought maybe Burton, if I know you've been studying or talking about this a lot, I thought maybe you might have some thoughts on this to share.
I don't think Burton's on the call.
He's not on the call. That was my guy. Is there anyone else on the subgroup that can help?
I've got a comment on that. The only cycle track I know of is along Sunrise Valley. Shouldn't instead of and, shouldn't it be or?
Or neighborhoods? Yeah.
Or shared bikeways? No. At the
not
end
there.
of it. Yeah.
Okay.
It should there. I don't think we're going to have all of those, are we?
You're right. We won't have them all together. We'll have select one, and we put that in the chart as to which one we preferred for each type of road. So we do have them defined, but
those cycle tracks take a lot of room. A lot of room.
Jennifer, I think the ROFAB analysis done by MTAC may be able to identify some of these gaps. We can do that later.
Okay. I think that Christopher was just looking for where has it been done poorly in the past to give us all visualization as a task force. And
Sunrise Valley.
Yeah.
Sunrise Valley couldn't be worse.
This was a theme from the equity group that we talked about. While a lot of the plan itself looks at new things that can make Reston even better, we wanted to also be looking back at where were things done poorly and how could they be corrected as well. So that's where that comment came from.
Wheeling is another area when you're, especially the bridge over the toll road.
That's correct too.
That's probably one of the worst areas. Yeah.
Yep.
So I think that we identified them in the subgroup, and what we did was within these charts, you will see, no, it's below this, the next chart, sorry, that was the road chart, the bike chart is past this. So here, you'll kind of see, we kind of denoted this one, WND should be a multi-use one, where Sunrise Valley is a cycle track.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of tried as much as we could to identify which one we thought was appropriate based on the current conditions of each bikeway. Does that kind of get to what you were hoping for?
Yes, and I think my comment was meant to apply to various areas in this section that where we felt something was not done well. I just focused it on the bikeways, obviously. But yeah, I think you pointed out some of that concern.
Okay. If you think of anything else, though, just let me know. It was just one I couldn't answer by myself.
It's Reston Parkway, Wheelie, and Sunrise Valley. Those are the worst.
Okay. We're talking so Jan, Virgin Bicycles. Oh, you were just taking out SOVs because it's only a bikeway section.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, I see. Because we're not talking about cars in this section, so we try to stay.
No, we are. No.
We try to stay on topic within each section.
Yeah.
So again, I was drawing up some of the charts to the text, so that's all that is there. And we only have a few more left here, and then I can open it up for comments. So you added ribs into the local bus service because we didn't have it in here, so that was probably a good addition. We added again some more equity type language throughout where we felt like we could. Transportation management, it will go over completely separately, so don't worry about this section because we're going to have a brand new section by the time we're finished here tonight. But I left it in there because there were some comments about it, and I want to make sure that they were addressed before we completely remove it. And then under placemaking, here my last text. Oh, that one I actually resolved. I thought I had resolved on this. I did resolve that one because that was the text I added to the chart. And then this one I'm adding because whatever we end up with transportation management, I wanted to make sure that we talk about through traffic on Reston Parkway because that is specifically in transportation management. Then Jan, you have a few more here. Street lighting should be used on high mounted LED lights. So lighting in general, I sent this out to the task force, but I was having trouble identifying good lighting regulations or guidelines within Fairfax County. And I know Looney pointed me to the zoning ordinance, which is kind of above this document, so I didn't feel like I should put that in. There was one other place you pointed me. But we can go ahead and add some specific, but we were trying to point to some general Fairfax County guidance and review that for lighting, but I haven't found it yet.
I don't think you will find it.
And I was hoping, because within the PRC or within RA, I know we have very specific lighting guidelines, so I thought there might be some outside of RA.
No, it's a real problem with the TSAs.
So if anyone has some suggestions though in lighting, I know that this will also come up in the environmental section of the plan as well. So I would highly suggest that anyone has comments on lighting, maybe we share it among the task force and the listserv because it would be very helpful. Apparently we don't have a lot of guidelines out there.
The state has just allowed these new standards for Reston, at least within the TSAs. area. So that's a good thing, but it'll take a while to work that through Dominion Power and the Department of Transportation people. This is a sore spot for me, that this whole lighting thing. I think it's a major problem. I don't have any.
When I first came to Reston, I was going to a meeting and I had to follow somebody out to get back to Vienna because it was so dark. I couldn't see the signs. So I followed their taillights out. I'm hoping that somebody doesn't have to do that. And then we can improve the lighting so they don't have to do that.
But I will say, you know, in Reston, we're pretty particular about our lighting. So I definitely think it's something that we have to refer to Fairfax County. And if that doesn't happen, we would still have to create our own, even if we referred to Fairfax County guidelines. So maybe that can be a takeaway for all of us, is if we want lighting standards, we better all start getting to writing. And then you, Jenny, added, but still desired, which is a multi-use trail. I can kind of see why you added that there. And then you took out the reduction of lanes or width of lanes on wheelie. I'm not really sure how we can add the extra space on both sides of wheelie to make it a walkable wheelie without reducing the lanes, but maybe there's some magic that FCDOT.
It seems to me the wheelie was built with a sidewalk on one side. I thought that was part of the new build. Am I wrong? Is there no sidewalk on one side of wheelie?
Yeah, there's a sidewalk on one side. It's just not the other.
Yeah, there's sidewalks on both sides of wheelie, but there is only a sidewalk on one side of the bridge. So if you go north and south on the TSA, there are sidewalks on both sides.
So that was one that was put in, that was agreed that there would at least be one sidewalk across the bridge where there was none before.
Jennifer?
Yes.
I think we have a hand from Tammy, and I don't know if she was in a previous section of this transportation outline or not, but Tammy, go ahead.
Yes, my comment about the lighting is not only are we at dark skies and we don't want lighting everywhere, but in particular, building on to John Carter's concern, oh my God, we do not want these giant cobra poles in areas where we're putting trees, and we want the ambiance and a pretty streetscape. So this adoption by the state of Reston specific lighting standards, we have to conquer that. And we're sort of stuck because we're a victim of waiting for them to get it particularly in Dominion. And I don't understand for the life of me how we allowed Dominion to bully us into having those Cobra lights. I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. I think Moira Callahan has a hand as well.
Yeah, Jen, can you go up to where the first place where it says wheelie? It's just up. What is the purpose of that? Nope, down.
Down, sorry. Here it is. This one?
What's the purpose of that sentence? I don't even understand it. Can we just get rid of that? I don't really understand what that's trying to say.
Well, because and I think it depends on who you talk to, but within the TSA areas, you would think that we're going to have a more walkable wheelie than outside of the TSA areas. So for instance, as you go north on wheelie, there isn't a sidewalk on the east side, right? All the way up to Baron Cameron's. So I think that that's something to think about, is do we want sidewalks on both sides of wheelie or not? Because that really makes a difference to whether the TSA area is different than the non-TSA area.
That's an introduction sentence followed by two separate paragraphs. One that describes the area in the TSAs, and then one describes the area beyond. I believe that's how it's structured.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't understand what that.
Yeah, maybe that is awkward, but that's what it's meant to be, an introduction sentence.
All right, thanks.
More bolded.
Yeah. And then the last couple here on lighting, and then Jan, can you help us understand this one at Sunrise and Upper Lake?
Oh, yes. Upper Lake is a horseshoe. And when you come up to Wheelie, there's a light, and then you turn left, and Upper Lake is right there. If you put a traffic light right there, you're going to have a backup from the light at Wheelie, Sunrise Valley Drive, and Upper Lake, that first Upper Lake. However, Upper Lake does go around as a horseshoe, and the other side of where it comes out, a traffic light could be put there, and it wouldn't jumble up the traffic, so to speak.
There are
Placement.
lights in the Campus Commons development plan. There are lights planned to be in both sides of Upper Lake.
Oh boy, see.
And
you're
it's
gonna
already
get
approved. It's already
stressful.
approved. Just FYI.
And we already have a light at the first Upper
Right.
Lake. So there's already one there.
Yes.
Okay.
So I might work on that one. And I
Okay,
think that was the last one. I think. Yes, that was the last one. So are there any overall comments besides the ones that Jose has already taken from people?
And
Jennifer, I don't see any hands,
I
but
would,
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Jennifer, I would suggest that a fundamental question we need to ask is, are people comfortable accepting this as the base text, recognizing that some of the comments still need to be resolved?
John, we do have some hands up now.
Okay.
So we got David Vanell, Michelle Kimmel, and I don't know if it's an old hand, Mark Callahan. But then we could circulate with Bill Penniman, but we can wait to see if there's any additional hands.
Okay.
Go ahead,
Jennifer,
David.
go ahead. Lead us farther here.
Jose, I don't know who you said first.
Oh,
Sorry.
David Vanell.
Is there somebody who wasn't on the TCWP?
I don't even know. I think Michelle Kimmel.
Yeah, Michelle's not. I heard that name.
Yeah, sorry, and I only raised my hand for a comment on a specific comment made to the text. But if we're going to do that at another point, then I can hold on that.
Yeah, go ahead and send that email. Send an email on the specific, and I'll go ahead and make the change, unless it's a concept.
Okay, yeah, it was a comment to. Sorry, I was just commenting on something that was changed but hadn't been resolved yet. Okay.
I think Laura put down her hand. We
Okay.
have Bill Penniman and David, unless there's other hands. Oh, Chris Daniel.
I just want to indicate my support for something moving forward from this very soon, because there's been so much energy put in it. And I know there's a lot of members of this working group that I think we need to energize elsewhere and just get, I think we should try to put something out soon, at least in a rough format.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
I don't see any additional hands. David, I'm going to circle back with you.
Okay, I do have a quick comment.
Oh.
It's Moira, sorry.
Moira, go ahead.
I have really not been involved with this part of the comprehensive plan due to I'm just too busy. But I appreciate everybody's efforts in this. But one thing I'm just looking at, I can't see all the text, but are you guys considering like people who are handicapped? I don't see anything about wheelchairs or mobility scooters. It's an aging population, and you're not going to have, you're going to have a lot of older people who are going to be with walkers and all sorts. So where do I see wheelchairs or mobility scooters? Is it mentioned in here?
Not specifically, but we speak to physical ability, and then we speak to universal design standards, because all of that is found in the Fairfax County plan.
Okay.
So
all right.
it has
car
to
bus, bicycle,
apply.
foot.
It kind of has to apply to us as well.
Great, thank you.
But I can,
Yeah,
when we get
the
equity,
physical ability.
when we get equity language, that might help. But I inputted some equity language, and then we can add.
Okay. All right. Just thinking about things. Thanks.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, David, I think I don't see any new hands.
Okay, thanks, Jose. echoing what Tammy said, I think when we talk about lighting overall in Reston outside the TSA, we should pay particular attention to how it's been organized in the past, how it's been set up in the past. Light set signalized intersections is fine, but we don't want, I don't think most residents don't want lighting all up and down the roadways, and it's just not what Reston is. Secondly, with apologies to Jan, I think raising the speed limits up from what had been originally put into this document is a mistake. People drive way too fast in this town. 5-10 miles an hour over the speed limit is routine. And I'm sure that the police could give you chapter and verse on moving violations in Reston and accidents in Reston. The slowing of traffic will make pedestrian and bicycle people much happier. It will save lots of bent metal and not to say injuries to people and lives of people. We've had a number of incidents of people being killed trying to cross the street and people speeding by. So I would strongly recommend that we reduce those speeds. 35 miles an hour is plenty fast on Reston Parkway. And down in the TSA, I'd say 20 or lower, because those streets aren't built for anything more than 25 and probably less. So just my 2 cents, but I think lowering the speed limits will make this a much better, much more effective connections around town.
Thank you, David. Bill Penniman?
Yeah, I would echo what David just said. It is both a place-making issue to have it quieter, more pleasant, and it's a safety issue. Walking on Sunrise Alley on the sidewalk while people are coming down at 45 miles an hour, because as David says, they speed, is scary. I mean, it's just not safe, and I would not want to be pushing a baby in a stroller with those kind of speeds. So the police can't be there often enough, and they often allow 10 miles over the speed limit. To achieve it, you need to lower the speed limit. You also need to consider traffic calming measures, because data shows that the number on the speed limit alone needs to be supported by the physical appearance of a slower road. And by that physical appearance, doesn't change much, but at least it makes it more comfortable for the driver to follow the speed limit.
So Jose,
I'm sorry.
sorry, we need to let you go next, Bill. So I'm trying to wrap up this chapter. Jose, can you just give us some guidance from the Fairfax County people?
People shouldn't be speeding 40 miles an hour. They should not be speeding from that. They should be keeping it to that, or 35 miles an hour, or 25 miles an hour. They shouldn't be going over the speed limit.
No.
Okay, guys, let's get some guidance from FC.dot on this, and we'll leave it there.
See them on the call, but
not tonight. Not tonight.
Okay.
But if was there anyone else? Because I want to move on to transportation management.
Yes, Charles Colby was our last hand, and then.
Okay. Hi, Charles.
Hi. I won't say much. If you want help with lighting section, I might be able to help. I had to work on that for my own cluster, so I'm intimately familiar with Reston's lighting standards. But I wanted to mention on lighting is that it should be considered for pedestrians. In other words, we might want to keep the roads darker for privacy, but people may want to walk in the evenings or after dark to some of the, to shopping areas and so on. And the lighting makes that easier. Cyclists also. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll stop sharing, and Bill, and I think Bill, you're up next.
I think it is John who is going to lead the discussion.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were.
John, you're muted. John?
Some say I'm more persuasive that way.
You are.
The muted, that is. So what I would like to ask for at this point, to draw a line under the overall chapter, minus the transportation management section, is the full task force basically comfortable with the text as it is, as the base text, noting that the comments mentioned tonight and those that we will receive in the next few days need to be somehow integrated and resolved in the final text. Is that the sense of the task force?
I see.
Let's
some
have a
hands.
show of hands, please.
I see a physical hand from Dennis, a virtual hand from Chris. I see a lot of hands. A lot of good smiles too. I think we have the hands, John.
Okay, thank you all. Okay. Moving now to the transportation management section. Walter, I need to begin by taking a time check with you. We were supposed to stop at 9:15. That leaves us only 5 minutes. Where are we?
Yeah, let's keep going. I think we're on a roll. John, just wrap it up, and I understand if anybody needs to drop off, but
Okay.
thanks, everybody.
In the interests of scarce time, I'm not going to give an overall presentation. I will simply say that the text is virtually unchanged, except where at its last meeting, the Transportation Connectivity Working Group discussed and voted on 6 issues, which are noted in the margins and sometimes graphically shown in the text. So I will make the assumption to save time that everyone has read this.
John, you have to put it up on the screen so we know what you're talking about.
Jose, could you please do that? Okay.
I think this is it.
So is it foolhardy not to point out the major changes, or should we just, or may I presume that and just begin to take questions? Let me I'll quickly say this. The 6 changes were, many of these were on split votes, but the first change was to remove reference to motor vehicular LOS. The second, also on page 1, is not to remove, is somewhat paradoxical, not to remove a procedure that was listed in the current comp plan, how to resolve difficulties achieving multi-vehicular LOS in the LOS level E in the TSAs. I was charged by the group to to get clarification about what exactly this means and whether it historically has worked. Okay. The third change on page 2 is to include metrics for non-motor vehicle mobility modes, notably pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit. So that we do want those non-motor vehicular metrics, but there's a question whether they should stay here in the text, in their full form, or simply a brief reference in the text on page 2, relocating them back to the discussion of pedestrian and bicycle facilities earlier in the chapter and also in the transit section. The fourth change, the task force, the working group agreed to retain the trip reduction goal table on page 4. This, by the way, is an update of the one currently in the plan. This reflects the actual formal agreement between Fairfax County DOT and VDOT on what the trip reduction goal should be, both midway through build out, assumed to be 2030, and full build out, assumed to be 2050. The fifth change was that we were going to, that we would, that we agreed to leave in the text on pages 4 and 5 a recommendation that we promote purely pass-through traffic. So traffic that has neither an origin nor a destination in Reston, simply wants to go somewhere else and uses Reston as a pass-through mode. To retain that in the text, but without specifying any of the specific means to do that. The next one was that deals with the county parking ratios, which are, this is on page 5. You see down here at the very bottom of the page, 2 little ratios. They both have to do with maximum parking rates. There are no, this is from the existing comprehensive plan. The existing comprehensive plan has no minimum parking rates, nor does it have any quantified rates, maximum or minimum, for residential. So what we've agreed is that it is important to include this section on county parking policies, but that I am delegated, or I'm directed to review the maximum and minimum TSA parking ratios with Fairfax County DOT and to report back to the committee and to the task force for further revision of this section, specifically on the specific ratios. And those were the major changes. Is that clear? And
we have a couple hands, John.
Okay.
We have Dennis and Tammy, and then if there's no additional hands, we can circle back to Gary.
Okay.
Okay, let me start out, and again, thank everybody for putting in all this incredible work. I'm a little concerned in this section that we have an aspirational versus reality concept going on here. I mean, the reality is we don't have a robust public way to get people around to get the jobs in Chantilly or in McLean or wherever. We don't have any way short of roadblocks to keep pass-through traffic going. And walking and biking is not an option for the vast majority of people. So I think one of the things we're charged with in all of this is to protect and promote the quality of life of our fellow citizens around here. And to do that, the automobile is going to be with us for the foreseeable future until we get Uber self-driving cars all over the place. And one thing that is a concern for me is there is not enough parking in Reston right now. There is not enough parking. And we're going to be adding tens of thousands of people. And if we limit the parking, it is going to be a nightmare. And I'll stop at that.
Thank you, Dennis. I won't comment on all your points, but I will say that one of the things that we discussed under parking is specifically that we in Reston are now under a 2018 Fairfax County zoning ordinance amendment applicable to all of the TSAs other than the Tyson Corner TSAs, which establish minimum rates. And we all, I think virtually everyone agreed that those minimum rates probably need to be increased. So that reflects your concern because those rates apply universally throughout a TSA, through the whole expanse of a TSA, no matter how far a residential building is from the transit station. And there was, I think, nearly universal recognition on the part of the task force, of the working group, that we need to have a higher ratio as multifamily dwellings are more distant from the metro station. So there was sympathy for at least that specific point of view.
All right, thank you, John.
Tammy?
Thank you. John Mooney, how many pages is your transportation chapter?
Depending on whether we lop off the LOS part, it is currently 5.5 pages. So
Of the whole thing, the whole transportation chapter is 5.5 pages?
No, not the whole transportation chapter. That's the transportation management
Right.
section.
How the whole chapter?
The whole chapter,
Yes.
without that section, is 17 pages long.
Okay. So my comment is less is more. I'm concerned about putting specifics in here. If you're going to change the ratios to reflect more parking availability, please get it in here. I am not going to vote on this, approving this, until that kind of thing is in here. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments?
I see. I don't see it anymore. Oh, I think Gary had a hand, and Jan.
Well, it was left up there before, but I was gonna, say something that John finally came to after Dennis brought this up with the problem with the existing ratios in the county. And John is gonna dig that out and get more to it. And following along with Tammy, something needs to be done to adjust that. It's rather striking the way those are set up by the county today, and they are unrealistic to follow along with Dennis's point. So getting them fixed is John's task. I assume it will be a little bit difficult, but we need to support getting that done.
Thanks,
Thank
Gary.
you, Gary.
So I'm just going to circle back with, we got a couple of the, I think Jan, Mark, and I don't know if Lynn had a hand up, but yeah, Lynn has a hand up. So Jan, go ahead. Jan, you're muted. I guess we can circle back to Jan. Mark, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So 2 points. Mr. Mooney, one of the things that I learned after we talked about this last week was that the charts in the current plan for the trip reduction goals are based on an outdated version of the ITE manual. Those are, I believe, the 2000, or excuse me, the version 8 manual. And ITE is now on version 10. And as I understand it, version 10 assumes a greater modal split or trip reduction in the baseline, such that if we're basing these reductions off of the 2010 version, we may be asking for a greater reduction than it was contemplated under the 2008 version of it. And so I would just suggest, as we finalize this, to run this by FCDOT one more time to make sure that these numbers, in light of whatever the current ITE standards are, match up with what they would anticipate folks achieving through the process. That's number one. And then number two, we had a lot of conversation in the subcommittee about the parking rates, and I think the reality is that each project that comes through has different parking demands based on location, based on amenities, based on what else is in the neighborhood, sort of thing. And I think the challenge with the meeting both the minimums and the maximums under the current plan is you don't want to overbuild parking, and you also don't want to underbuild it. And right now we have this kind of very narrow box where there's a minimum that almost matches the maximum. And if the conversation is about sort of what's the sweet spot of how you do this across all of the TSAs, because you can't really have different parking metrics for individual developments, or at least you can't put that in the zoning ordinance. I actually think that most of these projects are coming through with some sort of concurrent parking plan, be it a reduction or otherwise, that actually pays more attention to the details of where things are as opposed to a one-size-fits-all approach. And I would recommend that we continue to focus on sort of allowing each project to have individualized parking rates based on the mix of uses and proximity to metro being the drivers, as opposed to the one-size-fits-all approach. But that's
Thanks,
my 2
Mark.
cents.
Thank you.
Could we go back to Mark's first point? Could you go over that again, Mark, about the trip reduction goals?
Yeah, so as I understand it, and I'm not a traffic engineer, but as I understand it, if you look at this chart, it has 2015 as the baseline for when the data was created, or when this chart was created. And as I understand it, in 2015, the ITE manual, the Institute of Traffic Engineers manual, that is the basis for coming up with these percentage reductions, didn't include in their trip generation metrics an assumption that if you were close to transit, that the number of trips from an individual project would be reduced as a result of the proximity to transit. And so they overestimated the number of trips that would come from a project proximate to transit. And so when we were looking at trip reductions of 40 or 45% for those projects that were within the quarter mile, that's because ITE didn't assume that many of those trips, if any, would be taken via transit, and they would all be by automobile. Fast forward to the current manual, which, as I understand it, is version 10. It assumes that a percentage, and I don't know what percentage that is, but a percentage of the trips emanating within the first quarter mile would in fact be taken by transit, so that the number of trips that projects within the quarter mile would be expected to generate already have a built-in reduction of some percentage different from what the 2008 version had. And so whether a 45% trip reduction from an updated standard makes sense, I don't know the answer to that. And that's really all I'm asking John to investigate, is whether 45%, given a percentage is already baked in, is still the right number.
Thank you,
Well,
Mark. And
John-
I will, let me just, I do have a comment to Mark, Gary, that may be helpful. So there is indeed a version 10. I've used it for some calculations of my own. But what the ITE manual does is it estimates trip generation, not trip reduction.
Right, correct.
So the trip reduction calculations or projections are done by local jurisdictions, in our case, in dialogue with Fairfax, with VDOT. But basically, I'm a rank amateur, and I'm going to talk to Fairfax County DOT about this.
Yeah, and I agree with you, John, that that's the way it's done.
Okay, I think Lynn was next, and then we can circle back to Jan. Lynn?
Yeah, thank you, Jose. And John, I just want to thank you for spearheading this initiative. I know it has not been easy, and we have a lot of differing opinions. But I do want to bring forth some of the discussion in the smaller working group. In terms of the situation with Metro right now, Wheelie is the endpoint. We don't know when the additional stations are going to be opening up, but we have a significant amount of traffic that is coming from outside of Reston and using the Wheelie Metro as their launch point for transit into other parts of the area. And I have said more than once that I don't think that the Reston community should be penalized for the amount of traffic that is coming through that is not generated from Restonians. So that's one point. The other point in terms of parking demand, I know that there is a push to downscale the use of automobiles. Personally, it sounds a little bit like a social engineering project to me, but I think that we would be foolish not to think that the statistics for the adoption of electric vehicles are mislaid. I think that we need to pay a very specific attention to the adoption of electric vehicles, and we need to make accommodations within our transportation network to allow for electric charging stations and provide parking for the increased population. And lastly, in the small working group, I jokingly, but kind of seriously said, for people who want to move in Reston, if you want to move into Reston, it sounds to me that we are saying you may not own a car. So that's, thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
And just to flag the time, it's 9:32, so I'm gonna circle. I think there was two other folks. I think it was Jan, and I think Dennis Hayes had an additional hand. Jan, go ahead. Jan's having issues unmuting and muting. We do have one member of the.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, there you are. There you are, Jan.
I totally agree with Lynn, and I want to question the use of higher parking rates in the first phases of development, followed by lower parking rates or in subsequent phases, can be considered for reasons such as existing leasing requiring higher parking rates. That I don't get it. I'm very confused about that. I don't really know what that means. And the other thing that I added was when you were talking about anticipated visitors and available mobility alternatives when establishing the amount of parking to supply, all non-essential uses should realistically, adding in realistically, reduce their parking supply below the county minimum. I don't believe we should be doing that. I don't think we should be reducing it below the county minimum. So I would take that whole sentence out. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I've noted all your suggestions, and thank you.
Thank you, Jan. John, we do have one attendee in the chat, and I'm gonna probably say their name wrong. Yavuz Inanli. We're gonna try to unmute her or him to provide some comment.
Yeah, Jose, thanks. Well done with saying the name.
Yay.
No, I've been listening in for the last couple of sessions, and I think, John, you've done a wonderful job creating this document and getting it as far along as it is. Just listening to the comments from the past couple of task force meetings, I think there was a comment that was made about we don't know if Metro works. And I just think we need to have no doubt about the fact that Metro does work. And that if Metro didn't work, we would have to cover the National Mall and parking lots. And so I think as we're talking about parking reductions and trip reductions, it's not about people not owning cars. It's about when people choose to use their cars and take their car trips. I, as someone that, bought a home in Reston more recently and would, be a newer homeowner compared to some other individuals, I still own a car, but I don't use it for all my trips, right? And it's used, and so I do think, we do need to have it is okay to have parking reductions. It's a bit of a, if you build it, you will come. As we have built more bike lanes, I've seen more and more people biking for short trips. And so I do think, we need to ensure that people have multiple ways of getting around. And if we only focus on the car and say that only people are going to take automobiles, we're damning ourselves to that future and will cause more traffic. If we allow for other modes of transportation, people will take it. And it's not that they're not going to take cars, but they will choose to use cars at times when roads are less congested, which is the whole purpose, because most of the time, like right now, the roads are empty and they're perfectly fine. So it's not a capacity issue. It's a when and people choose to use the roads issue.
Thank you, Yavuz. And I would just say briefly, we try in this section of the transportation chapter to avoid any language that even suggested compulsion to try to get people out of cars.
Yes.
What we tried to do was not use compulsion, but attraction to other mobility modes such as walking, biking.
Yes, I think the text. I think the text is quite good. I think comments that have come along with the text can be a bit troubling at times, and so that was what my comment was in relation to, but the verbal comments that have been made at times. But I think the text is quite good.
Thank you. And I firmly believe that the greatest impediment to people using other modes like walking, biking, and transit is that those means, we've not made those means attractive enough. In the case of transit, we've not made it reliable enough, efficient enough, and in some cases affordable enough. So that's what we need to work on: attraction, not compulsion.
Agreed.
I think that's all the hands I see, John.
Okay, thank you, Jose. So what I would like to do at this point is ask the same question of this section that we asked of the overall chapter. Is the task force generally willing and desirous of accepting this as a base text, noting all of the comments that have been made by Jan and other folks, and all of the research that I'm supposed to do with Fairfax County DOT? Admitting all that, is the base text an acceptable base text? So could we have either a show of hands or electronically or physically, please? Okay. Jose, are you able to see?
Okay, so I see Jan, Mark, Alvarez, Charles Colby, Chris Daniel, David Vanel, Bill Penniman, and I think Gary. I don't know if that's is that a hand or not a hand? Or, no, probably not a hand. So I have those, and then
and my hand.
And your hand. I don't think Lynn's virtual hand is a real hand.
Okay. So
right, Lynn?
So let's did you take a tally of those? I did not.
I did. Oh, we also have some virtual hands. Give me one moment.
And thank you for Jose. My hand was not raised, and I did not intend for my virtual hand to be raised either. Thank you.
It was just to clarify, this is with the comments incorporated,
Exactly,
except for those debatable.
exactly.
Okay, then yes, my hand is
But
up.
John, to the extent comments have been made that haven't been further discussed, they may not in the end be included.
But they will be noted in the text
fine.
as something to be resolved.
Okay.
Right, yeah. Understood.
So I do
Okay.
have, if I'm not mistaken, if Michelle K's hand was an actual hand, I have 8. How many
Okay.
task force members? Oh, Gary, is that a new hand? Or
Michelle's was not an actual hand.
oh, okay. Oh, so let me cross that out. So I saw 7.
Okay.
Jose, I think some of the folks on the list have already gone away. I'm not sure they're still here.
Okay.
I think John and I worked on this
Let's
pretty
do- let's-
hard. I think there's a couple of issues that, really need to be tackled, like the parking issue is really significant, that we need to have that addressed. I think with that proviso, well, I would prefer this to be, as you know, vastly reduced. I would have to be on the John team here where we've been together on this.
Thank you.
John, do you suggest another? You
Well-
want us to just go individually, real quick?
Well, let's ask the opposite question. Who does not want to accept this as the base plan? And then I will ask who is abstaining. So who does not want this as the base plan?
So I see Dennis, Tammy, Lynn, Jennifer. Any other? Michelle, is that I guess a no?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Moira Callahan has a virtual hand saying no.
And could we, if that's all of them, Jose, could we then have a show of abstentions?
Don't see any abstentions.
Okay. So where do we stand, Jose?
So, if I'm not mistaken, so in the yes, I have Jan, Mark Looney, Alvarez, Charles Colby, David Vanel, Bill Penniman, Reston Bell, and John Mooney. I think that was 8. In the no's, we had Dennis Hayes, Tammy, Lynn, Jennifer, Michelle, and Moira. That is 6, unless I messed up the numbers.
Okay.
Whoever's here, was that how you guys voted? Generally? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. Bruce seemed to have dropped off.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of people have left, so
Yeah,
this
I
is not a
think that-
decent vote.
Right.
Agree
So,
with that.
Yeah, and I guess, I hate to break with John, but this is a tough one for me here to be on the team. I have a different view on some of this.
So,
so
John,
I don't think we're not, in my view, we're not going to resolve this tonight. It's very much a split vote. We note that. We've noted other comments that we need to assess for possible incorporation. We've noted issues that need to be resolved through consultation with others. So I don't think that we can get further tonight.
yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes, I agree with
We
that.
note that it's a very split vote.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all. We did a lot of work today on this evening on transportation, and Walter, we hand it back to you.
think the supervisor is.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm having
bandwidth issues. Sorry about that, everybody. I've broken up here in my Wi-Fi. But John, are we going to bring this back at the next task force meeting for review, or what is your proposal?
I would not recommend the next task force meeting. I would say at some point later, let us not, in my view, we should not distract the task force from its focus on other issues, notably the land use issues. And there's going to have to be some research done, and we're going to have to do more revision. So I would say not so soon, Walter, would be my view. But I would like to hear other people's point of view on that.
And I think, John, there's research you've got to do. You've got a big burden to get to the county on things like the parking issue. So you have a tough task ahead of you, and you have a big one already.
Yeah.
I concur with what you said, John. I think it just needs more time. I don't think next time is appropriate for it.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, well then let's, John will do some more research. I believe there might need to be some more conversations across task force members. But I want to thank everybody for sticking late. I know we're 45 minutes over, but I think this was extremely helpful. I think we got a lot done, especially earlier in the meeting, and this also helped clarify, I think, some things and show some things that still need some additional work. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate you staying late, and please stay in touch with additional ideas or suggestions, and let's keep on going.
Okay. Jose, can you send out Mr. Plattenberg's presentation along with that previous chart of
I'll be
population?
sending out, yeah, I'll send out materials tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Can I ask one question? Are we going to do open space next meeting?
I think that was the intent, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, Gary.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.
Jose, thank you,
Good night.
Supervisor
Thank you all.
Alcorn.
Bye now.
Good to see you, Albert.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night. Good night, everybody.